You're me, Louie T. Welcome to the 2018 NFL Draft Prospects 101 series, your guide to some of the biggest and hottest names of the 2018 NFL Draft. We're talking wide receivers, one of my favorite positions. No, not one of my absolute favorite position. I watch these guys like a hawk, and so I'm going to be a little overly critical with some of these guys. And this has been a tough year for the receiver position. Not one of the better years in terms of high level talent. You're not going to see 5 receivers go in the first round. You may see 2, possibly 3. You won't probably see more than that. And I'll tell you that it's tough to watch some of this tape because of the quarterback play for some of these receivers, including the one we're about to discuss now. And it's rough on some of these guys to go out and produce with some of the bad quarterbacks that they've had to try to catch footballs from. So I warn you up front, with some of these receivers in the 2018 NFL Draft, they've had some poor quarterbacks throwing them the football, and it's been really tough to evaluate some of their tape. But nonetheless, I'm going to try and give you my best assessment of these guys. And we're going to start with Alabama wide receiver Calvin Ridley. And this is a guy that burst onto the scene at Alabama as a freshman, lit it up, and really he never came close to matching what he did in that freshman season. And it was because the quarterback situation kind of fluctuated from year to year at Alabama. Jacob Coker, Blake Sims, you name it, we run the gamut. In the last 2 years he had at the quarterback position Jalen Hurts, a guy that got benched in the national championship game, which tells you all you need to know. So there have been some struggles at the quarterback position at Alabama, and some of that has hindered the quality of play around them. But make no mistake about it, at the receiver position, you can still see what a guy has, especially once they get the football in their hands and if they're able to separate. And you can see clearly on tape that Calvin Ridley is a top-notch receiver. And if you listen to some of the draft pundits, he's falling down draft boards. And if you start looking at some of these mocks, he's making his way down the draft board in the first round, not up. And I'm here to tell you, don't buy the hype. He's the best receiver in this draft class, and I'll tell you why. We'll start with his pros. So looking at Calvin Ridley and what he brings to the table, you start with his hands. I think they're top notch. And anytime you're talking about a wide receiver, we can sit here and we could talk about speed, size, all of those good things until our face turns blue. But if you can't catch the football, what good is it to be 6'4" and running a 4.4 flat? If you can't catch the football, none of that makes any difference. So you got to start with the hands. His hands are legit. He snatches the football out of the air, makes it look relatively easy. And so I think he's got among the best hands in this entire draft class at the wide receiver position. So more than pleased with what he brings to the table from a hand standpoint. Also, same thing can be said about his speed. 4.43 at the combine. He may be even faster than that. When you turn on the tape, this guy is absolutely blowing by defenders, running that deep post, running that 9-ball. He is absolutely flying, guys. And so whether you go back to 15 versus Florida when he was torching Vernon Hargraves, or if you turn on the tape in 16, 17 and watch him run past SEC defenders, or you watch him run past Clemson defenders in 16 and 17. And one thing's for sure, Michigan State, throw them in there in 16 when they were on their way to another national championship game. This guy can run. He can pick them up and put them down, and that 4.43 bears that out. And I think he may even be a little faster than that when it's all said and done. Quickness and suddenness, I think he might be the most explosive receiver in this draft when it comes to quickness and suddenness. The ability to get in and out of breaks, the ability to make a sharp cut and not lose any speed, the ability to string together multiple cuts and a couple of sticks at the stem of a route, break a dude off and leave him at the stem of a route. That's where a guy like Calvin Ridley excels. And you go to it's a slant. It's just a simple slant. And sometimes I think some of these underneath intermediate routes can be taken for granted. Some guys just round them off and run them ho-hum and really casually. And that's how you get balls picked off. When you run underneath routes, you need to be a little bit even more so precise in your technique, more so than a deep ball, because in a deep ball situation, if you get on a guy's toes, even if your route isn't the best, you can still beat him to the football. Or even if you don't run the best route and the guy is right there in your hip pocket, you can still fight him, out-muscle him, go up and climb the ladder and go get the football in that situation. When you're underneath and you make a mistake and that ball's thrown on a line instead of with an arc where you can actually go up and adjust and go get the football, when it's thrown on a line and a guy is right there, he's probably gonna beat you to the football if you don't run a good route and you don't break him off and you don't give him a stick or two and give him something to think about on that route. If he can anticipate where you're going before you actually make the move, your quarterback lets it go thinking you're going to win, trusting you to win, and you don't. There could be problems ensuing. So this is one of those guys where I just feel like he breaks dudes off. And that Clemson slant in 2017 that he ran a simple slant early in that ball game. And it's the thing of beauty. And it's those types of routes where guys just simply 1-2 stick, boom, on a 5-yard slant that separates from other guys in the draft. Because when you can run a slant, separate from a corner who's sitting at 5 yards waiting for you to break in or out, and you break him off to the point where you leave him, you turn him around, leave him, and you've got 2 to 3 yards of separation on a slant. Now you've got an opportunity to match up one-on-one with the safety. If you can give him a little something, get away from the linebacker, it's off to the races. And Calvin Ridley is one of those types of players. And that slant against Clemson just shows you, gives you a glimpse of the quickness and the suddenness that he has when he runs his routes and his ability to win and win big in routes underneath. Acceleration, the Michigan State game in 2016, there's a deep ball in that game where he just absolutely flies by the corner and the safety. And I've seen him do it multiple times on tape. I mean, you turn on just about any game you want, they're gonna take some shots to Calvin Ridley. Doesn't matter who the quarterback is, doesn't matter how strong or lack thereof the arm is. They're gonna go deep to Calvin Ridley because he's got that kind of ability, and you'll see him run by guys. I mean, the Florida game in 2015, he had both the safety and the corner beat. The ball was severely underthrown, and he had to go up and climb the ladder and go and get it. But he had both of those guys beat. In that Michigan State game, he absolutely ran by their entire squad en route to a pass that I think ended up down and around the 1-yard line. But he's got that kind of ability. This guy can fly. Route running ability, again, top notch. I think he's the best in this draft, along with a guy that I'm truly enamored with, that I think is very underrated in this draft, in Anthony Miller, but we'll talk about him at another date and time. However, Florida 2015, Clemson 2017, I already talked about that beautiful slant that he ran. Florida State 2017, the first game of the season. All right, all of those games have great examples. And again, you can probably go to any game with Calvin Ridley because he's breaking dudes off. But those were games that stuck out to me when you're talking route running ability and his ability to separate from man-to-man coverage, separate from a guy that's kind of trailing him in cover 3 coverage. These are games that give you great examples of him winning in situations where he's got a defender man-to-man or matching him in a zone and pretty much playing a man coverage essentially, and he's breaking dudes off and winning. And so his route running ability, to me, top notch. Again, one of the reasons I think he's the best receiver in this draft class. Physicality, for a guy with a slight frame, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on, 15 reps of 2 1/4 is very, very impressive. I mean, again, just think of it in terms of Orlando Brown, the big hulking 6'8", 370-pound offensive tackle out of Oklahoma that was only able to give us 14 reps of 2 1/4 on the bench. Just keep that in mind. You're talking about a 6 foot, 189-pound wide receiver pushing it up 15 times. So just keep that in mind when you think about this guy and what he brings to the table from a physicality standpoint. Toughness. Toughness isn't always catching a football and going over the middle and taking a shot and coming out with the football, which I don't think Calvin really has a problem doing now. He'll get down quick on the turf, and I don't see anything wrong with that. That's called preservation, all right? You know that you're a $190 and you're not trying to take a shot. You know you're not going to get any further on the football field. Yeah, hit the deck. I don't have a problem with that. But sometimes there's something to be said for mental toughness, and he really showed off some great mental toughness, because I knew he was frustrated. I could see it on his face. I could see it in some of his mannerisms, but he never showed anyone up, and he continued to fight throughout the game and made arguably one of the biggest plays of the game in that national championship game versus Georgia. He was really frustrated. He was open constantly, and the football was not being either thrown in his direction or being overshot. Whether it was Hurts or Tua, once he came into the game later, he wasn't getting the football the way that he should have in that football game. And to make matters worse, his brother was on the opposition, on the other team, on Georgia, and his brother was outshining him in that football game, and that had to frustrate a guy like Calvin Ridley, because he knows, hey, look, I'm the guy that's supposed to be the #1 receiver coming up in the upcoming draft. I'm the guy that's supposed to be the best football player on the field. I'm the guy that's supposed to be the best wide receiver in college football, and yet my brother is outshining me on the biggest stage there is. This is not what I signed up for. Yet he made the biggest play. He kept his head in the game despite being overthrown, being overshot, having some bad balls thrown his way that he couldn't come down with, having some situations where he was wide open and not getting the football thrown his way. He stayed mentally engaged, and when they needed him on a crucial 4th down, in a ball that was not thrown to him, I don't care what anybody says, Tua was not throwing the football to Calvin Ridley. He was throwing it to the running back in the back of the end zone. It would have either been picked off or incomplete. Either way, it was 4th down, okay? It wasn't going to be caught by an Alabama player. That's for certain, until Calvin Ridley comes in and saves the day, catches the football in the end zone on a ball that was not meant for him. Again, that's the mental toughness. That's just toughness in general. And this is what you get with a guy that is an extreme competitor. And I love that about Calvin Ridley. Yards after catch, or run after the catch as we call it in receiver world, his rack is outstanding. A Mississippi State game in 2017, I think that's your best game and best example of this guy just breaking dudes off and getting yards after the catch, or run after the catch, is more precisely what we're talking about here, because what a receiver does with the football after he catches it is also something that separates him from the rest of the group. You look at some of the best in the league: Julio Jones, Antonio Brown, Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry. What do they all have in common? The ability to get the football and do something after they catch it. And so run after the catch is sometimes just as important as being able to go up and climb the ladder and go get a football out of the air. If I could throw you a 2-yard pass and have you turn it into a 22-yard touchdown, that's just as good as me throwing it up 22 yards in the air and having you go up and snag it from a guy. Same result, but it's a lot easier to have it done when I just toss you the football on a hitch and have you do the rest. So again, run after the catch is important, and this is a guy that can give you some of that also in his game. Catch radius, ball tracking, I love both of those with Calvin Ridley as well. I think he'll go up and fight for the football. Is his catch radius all that great? No, not necessarily, and I don't think you're going to find a ton of receivers in this particular draft with great catch radiuses, but I think he does a good enough job of going up and trying to fight for the football. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, but I think his catch radius is fine. He will extend his arms to as far as they will go to go and get a football out of the air. And so again, I think you can get away with his catch radius and what he brings to the table there. Ball tracking, you throw it up in the air, this guy's gonna go and get it, especially if you put air under it and allow him to use that speed to go and get it. He will track that football down and go and get it, especially the deep ball. That's where he specializes, and so his ball tracking skills are just fine along with a lot of the things that he does in his skill set. Blocking. I love the fact that he's not the greatest blocker in the world, but he'll give you effort. But the thing I love about what he does is a lot of times as a receiver, and I think this is an underrated thing for receivers, if you just hustle, if you just run as if you're running, that DB has no idea if it's a run or a pass. He's going off of your mannerisms to tell him if it's run or pass a lot of times. Now, you got some DBs that are extremely nosy, and if they're playing zone, they get a chance to look into the backfield and peek and be nosy. But if a guy's playing man-to-man, or a lot of times with these corners, if they're playing cover 3, they're not studying what's going on in the backfield. They're watching you as a receiver, and if you come off the ball slow and lethargic and disengaged, they know it's a run, so they can be aggressive and go attack. But now that can also go against them, because a guy can come off the line kind of slow and sluggish, like Chad Johnson used to do once upon a time, to run a double move and go by you. But a lot of times receivers, they tell the story. Their body language and their mannerisms tell you if it's a run or a pass. how they come off the ball and look to try to get open. So with this guy, he will run you off as if he's running a real route. And so you don't have time to look in the backfield. And I love that because as a receiver, if you don't want to block, just run your guy out of the picture. They'll do the job for you. They'll run with you. Just run. If you just run, you'll run your guy 15 yards out of the play, and then next thing you know, here comes the running back, and all you got to do is turn around and just wall off your defender, and you've done your job. Okay? If you don't want to be aggressive and physical in the run game, at least run guys off, and that's what Calvin Ridley does, so I can respect that as well. Sideline awareness does a great job of getting his feet in. A lot of these college football players, especially the receivers, they come into the league with this 1 foot down mentality. It's gotten better over the years, but a guy like Amari Cooper came into the league and he had terrible sideline awareness and probably still does to a degree, but nonetheless, he's gotten better at it over time. But some of these guys come into the league and they're not aware of where the sideline is, and that's one of my biggest pet peeves. It's not 1 foot down, it's 2, and you gotta know where you are at all times on the football field as a receiver, and Calvin Ridley seems to understand that concept as he generally gets 2 feet in bounds by the sidelines. Versatility, I think you can line this guy up anywhere. You wanna line him up at the X, the Z, you wanna line him up in the slot, go right ahead. This guy can move around, and so his versatility to me is good from that standpoint. And then my biggest pro for him is dependability and clutchness. As a receiver, if you want to be a #1 guy in this league, I gotta be able to count on you in the most critical, crucial situations in a football game. If I need it on 3rd and 6, and this last 3rd and 6 conversion, if we get it, we'll ice the game away. The other team doesn't have any more timeouts. You make a play here, the game is over, we take knees, we get in the victory formation, which is the best formation in football, and we win the game. Can I count on you to win and get open and catch the football on 3rd and 6, move the sticks, and get us the W? When I need you the most, do you come up with the biggest play of the game? And the answer consistently with a guy like Ridley, I just talked about the catch he made against Georgia in the national championship game. 3rd and 15 versus Mississippi State. Game is tied late in the ball game. Final drive of the game. 3rd and 15. Think about that. How often do you convert a 3rd and 15, especially with the game on the line? Calvin Ridley over the middle of the field, catches it, it breaks a tackle, gets up the field, and does his team a huge solid by getting out of bounds as well. Picks up about a good 25 yards on the play, and that's the kind of clutch play you're looking for from your receiver in the most crucial situation. Led to a field goal that would ultimately win the game for Alabama on the road against Mississippi State. So again, making plays at the most critical, crucial situations of the game. That's what you get out of a guy like Calvin Ridley. So from all of those pros, we go to some of his cons. Measurables. Look, I'm not gonna beat him up for his measurables, but at 6 feet, 189, that weight is a little scary, because then you ask yourself, how aggressive can you be at the line of scrimmage with this guy? Can you beat him up at the line of scrimmage? Because again, in college football, you don't get a lot of aggressive corners, especially when you got a guy like Ridley that can run. And he established himself very early on in his collegiate career in his freshman year as a guy that will blow by you and embarrass you if you want to come up and try to be over aggressive. So rarely in college football do you see guys playing press coverage. So how will he handle some guys that not only can jam him and be aggressive and physical at the line of scrimmage, but also can run, can turn and run with him at the same time? At 189, again, he may put on some weight, but we'll see what happens there. I'm not in love with his measurables, but again, I don't think it's that big of a deal. Leaping ability, high pointing the football, I don't love that either. I don't think that's one of his strong suits. He will go up and fight for the football, as I mentioned earlier. And I think a great example of that is in 2015 in the SEC championship game versus Florida. He goes up for the football. And again, when you're watching guys that had bad quarterback play, sometimes you got to go back in time to see what they were doing. Because again, it's so hard to watch some of this tape with some of the quarterbacking that's going on. But nonetheless, 2015, his freshman year, where he was just electric and dynamic and was arguably his best year at Alabama. He's in double coverage against Vernon Hargreaves in the safety. He goes up, climbs the ladder, comes down with the football. Now, he actually didn't catch it clean. It goes through his hands to his body, but he's still able to corral it and come down with it. But again, I don't love his ability to go up and high point the football. There's another game, I think it's Clemson, where it's severely underthrown. He's got the defender beat. Severely underthrown, but the defender is able to come back into the play and get his hands in between Calvin Ridley's and wedge the ball loose. And so I don't love his ability to high point the football, but that being said, there's so much good here. There's not a lot of things to really dislike about Calvin Ridley's game. And so I think this is a guy that when it's all said and done, you can listen to all the pundits you like. When it's all said and done, he's going to hear his name called first when we're talking wide receivers in the 2018 NFL Draft, and for good reason. You want to hear his score and all of the other receivers that I was able to break down in this process. Go to the site LouieTNetwork.net for his score and all the other scores of the receivers, and go ahead and compare him to some of the other prospects in this draft as well while you're there that I had a chance to break down. You'll see how I feel about Calvin Ridley and where he measures up against some of these other receivers in the 2018 NFL Draft. But that's going to do it for Calvin Ridley in his 2018 NFL Draft Prospects 101 breakdown. If it happens in the National Football League, you know your man Louie T's got you covered. Remember, we're changing the game over here, period. Come back and join me. I've got plenty more receivers to get into. I'll see you then. Have a good one.